So I'm going to duplicate this layer twice, and let me call this, I'm going to rename this as a low and as a high, the same as in a frequency separation, of course, because I'm going to use frequency separation to sharpen the image. And in the low, of course, we're going to blur the layer, and we could use a Gaussian blur, but the one problem with Gaussian blur, it's really great if your computer is cannot handle a surface blur. Using Gaussian blur is really great. However, a bit better results can give you actually surface blur. That's the point. So Gaussian blur is okay. However, if you can wait, if your computer can handle, surface blur will be really great. And the reason for this is, as you can see, surface blur is really heavy. And okay, radius is just our actual blur, and threshold we can build actually difference. Let's have a look if it's going to change. If I'm going to pull up threshold too much, it's going to break out the edges. I don't want this, so I'm going to find the threshold when it's not affecting the edges, and thanks to this, the edges, so the areas I don't really want to sharpen the image, are going to stay the same. There was 8, and I believe that was right, because I was trying this before. For the purpose, as you can see, it's not affecting these areas which I don't want to be sharpened, so it's really great. And radius, I think it might be a bit too strong, so I'm going to go down to keep really soft blur for it. And with Gaussian blur, you would go the same. As you can see, I'm going to the point where the cheek and the skin seems to be really even out, like very soft, something I don't want. So but without not too much. As you can see, it's all soft, but we keep control. We can see everything is over here, right? But we even out the skin pore. So this value is okay. And the same with Gaussian blur, you would do just even out the areas that to make this not see any kind of detail, but it will be probably a bit lower than when we use typical for frequency separation retouching. It would be a bit lower in this case because our skin is really right, so I would probably put the value, as I was given around 12 before, it would be probably around 8 for this size of the image. But I just guess. I would have to see this to say this really right. And the problem with surface blur is, which you can notice right now, it's progressing really a lot of time. So I'm just going to give you this a bit better option, but to save your time, sometimes it's just better to use Gaussian blur. So finally we get to this point, and maybe what's worth to say, if your computer is killer machine, use surface blur. If not, better go with Gaussian blur. But right now, finally, it's a better step. So we're going to the high layer. And the same as in frequency separation, image, apply image, layer in that case will be low, blending add. And I'm going to invert this. So hit OK right now, and I'm going to zoom this a bit better, but a bit closer. So you're going to see how that sharpen our image. I'm going to set vivid light at first, and I want to turn on visibility on this low layer. And as you can see, that's the before and that's after. The vivid light giving very soft sharpen. And of course we set up this for the purpose of really soft sharpen, but unfortunately anyway it affected some of the areas I didn't want to. If we go with linear light, the effect will be stronger, and it's way too strong for me in that case. That's why I usually go with vivid light. However, anyway, I'm going to pull down the opacity till around 60%, maybe that case will be alright. And what I want to do, I'm going to create a layer mask, and using the black color, I'm just going to clean the areas I don't really want the sharpen. So maybe not with 100, but 60. And for sure on the nose over here, this area is quite rough, maybe not rough, but we don't want to sharpen such an area as this one. Lips, they were already a bit sharpened, but over here we don't want to sharpen this. I don't want to sharpen the fingers, because if we sharpen them they might get a bit rough. Once again, we were working on them not for the fact that we want to bring up all of the details from before. So like this. And of course this area where we have a lot of hair, surface blur usually could resolve such troubles. I could put actually threshold even lower so it wouldn't affect that much. But of course this area is not something we want to sharpen because we have a lot of tiny hair. So when we do this, we can actually bring up too many details. That's why I prefer to stay careful with this area. And the neck over here, it's quite clean. And of course hair, I don't want to sharpen them really, or at least not that much. So I'm just going to clean over that area. And I need to look on the layer mask. It all looks fine right now, and I'm looking at the image and the image looks fine as well. So yeah, that's the first step I usually do. So I'm going to put this to the group, or now I can remove this low layer, and I'm going to call this Sharpen. Other step, which will be optional for your sharpening process, is adding some noise to the image. I have to say, I not always add some noise. I'm sorry for this. I decided to clean this area. You can remember this area was rough. I don't want to bring up details from that point. Okay, so now we can go to the noise. And about adding the noise, the thing you need to know, it's kind of optional, but sometimes it can work really great. So I'm going to create a gray layer. I'm just going to call this gray, and I'm going to fill this with 50% gray, edit, fill, and 50% gray, hit OK. And I'm going to change this into soft light. And now let's go to filter, noise, and add noise. Once again, the value of amount of percent you're going to add depends on the size of the image. I'm going with Gaussian monochromatic, and as you can see, when I go too high, you can see what is happening on the image. It doesn't look so well, and too low, it won't be really visible. But this size of the image is not that small. It will be around 5%. If the image will be smaller, the amount will be smaller, so we have to adjust this. We can check the preview, and that's really small change, but it's working really nice. And the same as before, I'm going to create layer mask, and obviously I want to clean up this from the hair, this time with 100%. I don't want any of this on my hair. I don't want this on the eyes as well, because I was sharpening them before. And also, I don't need the sharpen on the eye from the previous lesson, because as you remember, we sharpened them. I don't want this on the fingers, on the lips, of course. Noise on the lips is never a great idea. They has to be smooth, nice, and glossy. So yeah, that's how it looks like. I'm looking at the image to find more areas, and of course that area won't be really necessary. But I did this with soft pressure, so it still stays fine. Yeah, and that's how it looks like, maybe a bit lower here. So now I'm going to create a group for this, Ctrl-Command-G, and I'm going to call this Sharpening. So let me zoom this image just a little bit to make you see the difference, because from the distance it can be really difficult. However, I'm going to zoom over here on the skin texture, and that's the result before and that's after. I believe you can notice it because right now I can see it over here. As you can see, we have really even out the skin, but after this sharpening step it adds a little bit of noise, a little bit of sharpening, and we can actually see a very nice skin texture. So that's how I do sharpening. There is of course few methods. I find this method, what I used over here, the most powerful, the most useful for me. However, I recommend always to try and experiment with different methods. Non-destructive. Let's open our adjustments over here, and all of this you can actually use at the end of your color adjustment. Many people using gradient maps. However, as I was using gradient maps at the beginning of my career, I stopped using them. I felt that sometimes they might be a bit destructive for the image. Even if not, they can change the colors too much. Sometimes they give you really nice results. However, in the beauty retouch, I believe we need to look for natural colors that exist on the image, and we need to try improve the colors that exist. We need to adjust the colors that exist and not put on the different colors. So that's the very important other thing. I recommend using levels for pulling up the contrast, and curves as well for contrast, for lights, for highlights, for shadows, as well as for some color grading. I'm not using often curves for color grading, but that's something you can use. So there's just few tools I'm usually using. You can experiment a little bit with photo filter if you want to change the temperature of the image. However, I'm not usually using this as well. So what I use mostly is selective color, and that's pretty much the main thing I'm using, and that's pretty much all I'm using actually. And I'm going to start with reds, and I'm starting with reds because they are specific for this image. As you can see, we have some of the red areas of the face. So what I recommend you, if you have some specific areas, just open, experiment with everything, how everything looks like for you, etc. So let's start from cyan. I need to have a look, and I'm going to pull down this cyan just to pull up some of the red colors. I'm going to improve the cheeks as well as the lips. I'm going to bring up just a little bit of magenta. Let's have a look. It's a bit stronger. I think I like this color, but I need to check exactly if it's suitable. So yeah, something like that. And I'm going to invert this layer. That's just the basic step. And I'm going to change the color of the brush for the white. Flow 100 at the moment. And first of all, I'm going to clean up the lips. You don't have to be careful. I don't have any red color around the lips, so just go with this. And I improved this red color just a little bit. Now I'm going to pull up the flow, pull down the flow, make the size of the brush a bit bigger, and I'm just softly going to paint over this area just to pull up some of this red color, this nice red color which exists over here. As you can see, it's a bit more visible right now. I think I even add a bit too much. Okay, right now I think it's suitable. Eventually we could try with color black to knock down some of the color on this black layer mask, just a little bit, because I want it to stay, but I don't want really such a strong color, something like that. I was painting with white once again, so my mistake. Didn't notice, of course. I want to knock it down just a bit with the color black. Right now everything is fine, and yeah, it looks correct. So then after this first step with selective color, I'm going to selective color once again, but I'm going to take care about the other area. I want to take care about the main area of the image, so I'm going into neutrals. What about neutrals? Once again, I'm going to experiment with the colors, and I don't like this red color that much, so I'm going to bring up some of the cyan color. It makes this image a bit colder, but I really like this. I'm going to try with magenta, and about magenta, maybe let's pull this a little bit down, but it's going to make this a bit greenish. However, when I'm going to pull this up, it's too red, so I don't really like this red color, so I'm going into these cold colors now. Let's have a look. And now I'm going to see how does it looks with yellow, but the yellow doesn't look really suitable for the skin, so I'm not going to add any yellow color. Let me see this once again. Okay, now I'm going into whites, and I want to take down the whites, the yellow color from the white areas. So this image is a bit colder, but I usually fancy the cold colors, and we're going to see. So I don't want to affect the hair for sure, so I'm just going to pull up the flow at 100, and with black color of the brush I'm going to paint over the hair, because I want to bring up this nice natural color of the hair. Have a look. Before it was warm image, and after it's a bit colder. If you think it's too strong, if you find your colors too strong, you can always pull down some of the opacity to make the effect really soft. So next step, I found the point that this hand might be too yellowish, and selective color is really fantastic if you think some area of the image has too strong colors which are not really suitable to the rest of the image. So I'm going to selective color yellows, and I'm going to take down some of the yellow colors. I'm going to invert this layer because I don't want to affect all of the image. And with color white, I'm going to paint all over the hand. So it's going to take down some of the yellow colors from the hand. Very basic. Okay, let's have a look from the distance. Maybe it was a bit too much, so I'm just going to take down opacity a little bit. And right now I think it's suitable. However, the thing I want to do, I want to improve the white areas even a bit more. And once again, I find selective color really helpful for this. So once again, selective color. You can actually notice I'm really using a lot of selective color, and I'm going to whites, and let's have a look what is happening. When we pull up the blacks, we can absolutely nivellate the white areas. I want them a bit more visible, so I'm going to pull it down. It can be more, so we can see everything very clear, but later on we just can simply pull down the opacity. So that's why I'm choosing this quite strong minus 12% for black. I'm just going to invert this, and with soft flow and of course color white of the brush, I'm going to improve the neck. I have not enough white color over here, I feel so, that's my personal feeling. So I want to bring up some of this if it's possible, and that will be mostly on the neck. Most of the work here will be on the neck, and a bit less on the face. Just a bit over here, because I want pretty much the color to be similar. The neck is a bit too shadow, but I see the contrast is too big for me between the face and the neck and the forehead. And this cheek is quite wide, so I don't need this over here, but in that area a little bit. the forehead, as I said, and over here. And let's have a look. We have a bit more contrast. You can notice this here, you can notice this on the forehead, and not such a strong difference on the neck over here. The reason is because we didn't have so much of the white color on the neck, just a little bit, so it's trying to pull up as much as it can. Let's see from the distance for the better perspective for me. Before, after, as you can see, I pull up some of the whites a bit more, and I really like this. And the last use for me for the black color, I'm sorry, for selective color, is this background. It's quite dark, however I can make this even darker, I believe. So I'm going into blacks, and as you can see I can pull down blacks and it doesn't look well, but I can add just maybe 3% for the background, or maybe 2, because by levels I'm going to improve this and I don't really want to affect too many other areas. And as you can see, just 2% doing a huge difference for the image before and after. It's making the background really dark. I'm going to set 78 maybe, and I'm going to put this into the group, Control Command G. The one thing is we need to be really careful. It made the hair a bit too dark, so I'm going to paint with color black, of course, and strong flow, because I want to bring all of this, or most of this, over here. It made them a bit too dark, so we just bringing this up. We want the hair really shiny, and you can improve the hair using selective colors, because the hair have pretty much yellowish colors. So by using yellow selective color, we can actually improve them a lot. I'm going to call this group colors. It's not a huge difference, because in this image I don't really want to change much. I don't think it's necessary, and this small change make this really nice looking, and I like the way it looks right now. The next thing I usually do is levels, and levels I use for just working with the contrast, simply speaking. So as you can see, when I pull down the white slider, I'm improving the white areas. You can easily notice this. I don't want to improve too much, so I'm just going to take down a few points of this. That's going to see that very small difference, a bit brighten, and few points for the black areas for a bit more contrast. Not really much of this contrast, but the same with contrast. I'm not a huge fan of such a huge difference. Once again, I'm just thinking if I should add a little bit more, but I really like this right now. That's why I don't need to work so much. And of course we can try color grading with curves. I don't really think I'm going to use it, because I do really like how it looks right now. I do really love the way it looks. You could play with this if you would like to go into a bit colder colors. I would hide the hair. The image looks quite alright, but I think before that these warm colors look even a bit better, but I can add just very soft effect. Something like that. I'm going to see Control Command G. I'm going to call this contrast. It doesn't make really such a huge difference on the face. However, I need to cover I need to create a layer mask over here on the group, and I'm going to paint with black to bring up the natural shine of the hair. I really like the look. It's really bright, a lot of contrast. So that would be the final adjustments I usually use. And as I said before, they are not typical. As you can see, I could go into different colors. I could go into warmer colors. I could make this portrait really cold, etc. It depends on your request of your client. If you're doing this for yourself, for your portfolio, it depends on your personal taste or your personal standard of beauty. But of course, about personal beauty standards, we have to make this suitable for the industry. So it depends if something like this really exists. We can go with a little bit of the personal taste, but it has to be suitable for some standards. So that's how I do the final adjustments, the final color corrections. And I really love soft color corrections, and I would recommend you to do really soft corrections to see how image actually change. Sometimes our eyes get used to, so we cannot see how big changes we are doing. All of this I'm going to put into the group Ctrl+Command+G, and I'm going to call this final adjustment. So thank you for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed, and I believe it's not the last of our lesson.